Today's session is hosted by RCAP Solutions, which is part of a nationwide network called RCAP, which stands for Rural Community Assistance Partnership. My name is Rebecca Novak. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to be your host for today. I'm in Massachusetts, and I work with the purple states on the map there, which is from New Jersey up and including Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands. We are a nonprofit company providing training and technical assistance to rural communities and tribes with drinking water and wastewater treatment, utility financing, management, and general administration. Michael Salona is the environmental analyst for the MassDEP drinking water program, and he'd like to say a few words here.
Thanks, Rebecca. And thanks everyone for coming to this cybersecurity training this morning. I wanted to thank our partners, New England Waterworks Association, EPA, UMass Amherst, and RCAP Solutions for helping put this together. Cybersecurity is an important issue, one that certainly has become more front and center due to recent issues at public water systems. In response, the MassDEP drinking water program has taken several steps. We've increased the amount of cybersecurity related news going out to public water systems. We've developed simple, catchy, one-page flyers for operators in their workplaces. Those are available online and also in the materials folder in this training. And we've partnered to present this free training to operators, and we're also working with EPA on a separate training at the end of May. We will be distributing information on that soon. And with that, I'd like to turn this training over to Andrew to get started. Thank you for attending.
Thank you, Michael. Let me just do a couple setups here. Okay. So Rebecca, right now, okay, that's why. Okay. Good morning. Thank you for attending the AWWA cybersecurity training class. We have a really good turnout today. There are about 90 participants logged in right now. My name is Andrew Hildesmith. I've worked at the Massachusetts Water Resources Authority for 30 years, and a good chunk of that time I was responsible for the Scada system, its maintenance, operation, and its security. I've done a few cybersecurity projects with the AWWA, the Water Isac, the EPA, and some other organizations. I have several cybersecurity certification, and just generally, I enjoy this topic. There are lots of ways to approach cybersecurity at a water utility, and this course covers the AWWA's water sector cybersecurity risk management guidance and associated self-assessment tool. It's based on national cybersecurity standards and can help move your organization forward, but it's not a quick fix. Keep in mind that cybersecurity, it's a long haul team project. Unfortunately, one advantage that we have in the water sector is that we're good at emergency planning and response, and cybersecurity uses those same skill sets. The course includes a demonstration of a tool that identifies cybersecurity gaps that can be addressed in a cybersecurity improvement plan. There are a number of course handouts in the materials section of the control panel. One of them, just to point out, might be handy, is called the Water Cybersecurity References and Resources, and that has a number of well, it has three sections. One is on acronyms and abbreviations, another's on terms, and another are resources that you might want to refer to for additional information. And on the acronym front, I'm going to start off with a blast of acronyms. And so just, we often think of the control system as the SCADA system, but other names include Industrial Control System, so ICS, OT for operational technology, and also process control systems. So for whatever reason, the AWWA chose process control systems, and they had a reason. So PCS is what you'll see a lot in this documentation. And the so just if you see PCS, think whatever term you're used to, whether it's SCADA or ICS or OT. The class is designed as a 4-hour class, in-person, small, 20 people, breakout sessions, group breakouts, hands-on. So this is condensed to 3 hours. We're going to be able to cover everything, but it's going to be a little quicker. As we go along, there are 5 modules to the class. At the beginning of each module, there's going to be a chat question. So you go to the control panel chat section and type in an answer, and the questions relate to you or your utility. And then at the end of each of the 5 modules, there'll be 2 more, those questions, the questions about you and or your utility, they're going to be poll questions. So Rebecca will pull up a poll, and they're multiple choice type questions. And the same thing at the end of each module, there'll be poll questions, 2 poll questions related to each module's content. And then there'll be a couple of chat questions, maybe 3 chat questions where you're going to just type in some information, just quickly type in a few phrases or words. And finally, most importantly, is the chat questions that you ask. And so, as Rebecca said, she's going to keep track of questions. And if we have, I'll try to answer them all. If we may not have time, and if we don't, I'll write out answers to all the questions and send responses through Rebecca to everybody who attends. Okay, so the learning objectives, to recognize the drivers. So what's reasons for getting busy with cybersecurity, including America's Water Infrastructure Act of 2018, explain how to use AWWA's guidance and tool, generate an Excel output file from the tool. So that the tool, so that just a quickie summary is, you got a set of questions that get asked, and then those questions go and from your answer select some responses that are controls, and they come back to you as an Excel file that you can refer to and update. Then another objective is recommend controls to develop a cybersecurity improvement plan. Explain control priorities as recommended by the tool, and apply the tool and complete the utility self-assessment yourself. So that you won't be able to do that during this class, but after the class, if this seems like a thing to do for you or your utility, and even if you decide this is not the right approach, you can learn a lot by going through this process and help you understand cybersecurity issues better. There are 5 modules. Here's our agenda. The first module, why is cybersecurity important? It should last, it's going to take a little more than 35 minutes. Module 2 is the self-assessment questionnaire. Module 3, cybersecurity controls, and we have a 10-minute break. So it's an hour and a half, about a 10-minute break, and then another hour and a half, and we'll resume with how to use the tool and implementing recommendations. Okay, so here's the start of a module, why is cybersecurity important, which means there's going to be a poll question directed to you about you or your utility. So I'm going to read it off. Rebecca can pull this up as a poll for you to respond to. What is your primary work role? The poll in this go to webinar format, that you can have 5 answers. So I may, I couldn't put in all the choices, but perhaps one is close to what you do. And we'll just give that a minute.
Yeah, so far 51 people have voted, so we'll give it a little bit more time. We'll allow everybody to find this. Make sure you find the submit button at the bottom. And sometimes if you are in desktop mode and you can't see the submit button, hit escape. It means you're in full screen, and sometimes it just makes the submit button disappear for whatever reason. But if you ever can't answer a poll question on the screen itself, feel free to write it in the chat box, and that'll still count as your participation.
Okay, so I'm just looking and I see 80% of folks responded, so that's great. You know, keep it up through the class. And about a third are operators or maintenance folks. And so that is excellent. You all are like the foundation of this whole business. So what you learn about cybersecurity is really important for the whole, or your organization and the industry in general. We've got about 40% of utility managers. So you're apt to be the folks that are going to be making sure that you improve the cybersecurity at your system. And then a quarter of the folks are consultants. Okay, thank you. So back to module 1. So why is cybersecurity important? We're going to go over recognizing that threats are real. I think that's pretty apparent. Identify potential consequences of not protecting systems, and explain the benefits of using the AWWA cybersecurity tool. We face, there are all kinds of threats out there. This is just a quickie hit on some of the big ones. Social engineering, everybody's used to the phishing emails that we get, and somebody's behind that trying to gain access to maybe your money or maybe your system. They often can result in a ransomware attack. There's malware that's geared towards taking advantage of flaws in your software. The sources of the threats can be state-sponsored or criminal. And then there's this other category that we haven't really seen in the water world, but it's the cyber physical sabotage. So taking a cyber attack and trying to do damage to a system. And the reason that we're vulnerable is because we're connected in so many ways, which is great for lots of reasons, but it does expose us to anybody who wants to do damage. And there are tools like this. This is a little screenshot from something called Shodan, and that's a search engine that looks for devices on the internet. So if I've got a PLC on the internet, this is going to pull that up. It's going to show that and put it in its database. So it's just like a tool that, productive security people use, but also, adversaries. The mindset of the adversary. So there's, just going back, there's the criminal element, and that's kind of that's the biggest population. That's our biggest threat that we face. And there's they're very organized groups, and then they're just individuals, and the state sponsored. So for us here, we think of that as Russia and China and North Korea and Iran, but it could be any group that's sponsored by a nation. And then other might be, some individual who's smart and just kind of poking around, but they may not have kind of the moral sense of what's appropriate and not, and might go into a system where they shouldn't be. And I just sort of categorize that as jerks. They don't worry about breaking the laws or disrupting systems. They can be smart, they can be not so smart. The smart ones will manipulate. They can dig into the software and find weaknesses, and they can be persistent. So it's a real threat. This slide is just saying something that we know, that social engineering threats are increasing, and this is showing an increase of about 20% over the course of from 2013 to 2018. I think it's continued to grow since then. It's such a lucrative way, an easy way for an adversary to break into a system. So social engineering is definitely on the rise. this slide's pointing out how most of the breaches are coming from outsiders. It shows a fair amount from insiders, but think, our biggest threat is from the outside folks. We do, we have an insider threat as well, but outsiders is where most of our risks and threats are coming from. We're going to go into a few of the incidents that have happened recently. Oldsmar is like our big, it's sort of like the poster child, and it happened just a little while ago, and it's, probably motivated, some of you to attend this and to pay more attention to cybersecurity. The thing that's cybersecurity has a cost, and it's an upfront cost of you need to commit resources to it. But then if you get broken into, there are real costs. And this picture on the upper right is just, I was going to zoom in on that one because it's, oops, that's not what I wanted to do. And it just kind of highlights the cost. So on the right, you've got the sheriff, who's very professional, did a really good job presenting what happened. The middle, you've got the mayor. He's when you're watching this video, he's almost enjoying the attention. But the guy on the left, his name is Al Braithwaite, and he's showing the cost of a breach, and he's like the you and the me of this incident that has to deal with the outfall of it, and it's not easy. They were really great to share some information after the initial presentation. They kind of went quiet, but sharing, if you have an incident at your utility, share it. Let the DEP know. The DEP can pass it on and share it with other utilities, because we all learn from these things. In this case, they had a remote access through TeamViewer, which is a good, legitimate program, but they had poor password controls. They were using the same password for multiple accounts for remote access. They had a firewall, but in place, but it wasn't activated. They were using Windows 7 PCs, so those are past their life. And an adversary went in legitimate, through the TeamViewer application, probably because of weak passwords, and manipulated the HMI, the human machine interface on the SCADA system, to change the setting for the sodium hydroxide from 100 parts per million to 11,100 parts per million. So it's not necessarily that the concentration could change that much based on the equipment, but it's a scary thought for customers and for us as utility people. And this was sort of extra interesting for us in Massachusetts, just because we had the Spencer incident, I think in 2007, and this is the Massachusetts DEP back with the Spencer incident implemented some changes that would, if Florida had done some of the same things, this person wouldn't have been able to dial it up to 11,100. So that's kind of cool. So some other ones earlier this year, there was a water utility. I don't know who the water utility was, but they had another somebody accessed their system, their control system, through TeamViewer again, and deleted some of their, here I'm calling it OT, but remember, so operational technology, think industrial control system, process control system, so SCADA system, and the individual deleted some of those SCADA files. The next one was at the end of last year, and there was a large US water utility that had eGregor ransomware. That's one of the ones that, in addition to encrypting your files and making them inaccessible, they extract files and post them as another way to extract money from you. So they're like, we're going to post all your sensitive files if you don't pay us. In this case, the water utility, well, so there were the engineers, there was more than one engineers received an email, a phishing email, but only one of them opened it. And when he opened it, it loaded up a banking Trojan, a kind of software that gives access. And it was a little over a month later, so that the folks who then went to do the ransomware came in. So a month after the phishing attack, the ransomware actors came and started to try to extract files and started to try to encrypt files. Fortunately for this utility, there was a small number of their servers that got encrypted. The files were not extracted, and so it was a success story. But it was a big, it was exhausting for them to recover. They had 7 servers that were encrypted, but they reinstalled. They wiped all their desktops and reinstalled them. They did a lot of work to make sure the system was clean. They upgraded. This was kind of the nice thing about Awwa, America's Water Infrastructure Act. They had just finished writing their emergency response plan. So they had a cyber incident response plan ready to go, which helped them respond. They also had the projects that they wanted to do to improve cybersecurity. So out of this, they did those improvement projects. They spent $100,000. They had, and one kind of nice thing or interesting piece was that when they were breached, when they realized that they were being breached by a ransomware, they reached out for help, right? So they went to 2 big companies. One was Verizon and another one was Mandiant. And both companies said, can you help us with this ransomware incident? Both of them said, nope, we're too busy. And so that was a good learning experience for all of us. This utility reached out to the Water Isac, which is a resource we'll talk about in a little bit, but it's an organization that can help us all, and found out from them the name of a small company, a cybersecurity company in Texas who knew how to work on egregor projects, problems, and came in and helped. So that was a great in terms of sharing information. And egregor is, I don't know what the ransom request was, but that egregor ransomware, the sort of average ransom request is $700,000. So something on that order. This utility was facing that as a choice. Do we pay the ransomware of $700,000 or do we work to restore the system? They were able to restore the system. And part, just as an aside, one thing that helped them a lot was they had endpoint protection, and this is not an advertisement, but Carbon Black was something that they had that was able to block the encryption action. And it was just happened that 7 of their servers didn't have that application installed. We've got another, so this was last spring, there were there were very small utilities in Israel that had some PLCs, the programmable logic controllers, part of the control system, exposed to the internet, and somebody or a group came and modified the chlorine dosage. So they, had but it was spotted early, and the treatment didn't reach, that change in treatment didn't reach the customers. The spring of 2 years ago, I put this one in because it was only just a little while ago, the Department of Justice filed an indictment against a former employee. So even though most of the breaches are coming from outsiders, we need to keep a mind on insiders. In this case, a former employee did remote access and turned off the treatment process. The thing that's valuable and hope gets out and hope it happens is that if this person is convicted and he has a possible sentencing of 25 years in jail and $500,000 fine. So not that I hope he gets both of those things, but if he does, I hope it's well publicized to make it clear to everybody that, you know, messing with the water system is not good for a lot of reasons. I'll quickly go through some other incidents. These are older ones. This was Lansing Board of Water and Light. And so it was a ransomware of a small amount. And they paid it, but they spent a total of $2.4 million restoring and upgrading their system. So it was a big cost. This was a little community in Florida, and this was a couple years ago, and they paid the ransomware, and it was because they had insurance that was willing to pay all but $25,000. So it seemed like, well, we might as well do it because we paid for this insurance. But that's another big dollar amount. This one is to do with the Onslow Water and Wastewater Authority. They decided not to pay the ransomware. I'm not sure how much it cost them to recover their system. This Baltimore, so it was not a water system, but it did impact this did impact their billing, and they decided not to pay the ransom of like $67,000, but they spent about $10 million to restore and upgrade their system. So another big impact. Jumping to the risk of physical damage. So this is something we haven't seen in the water sector, but there's a history of people remotely doing physical damage to systems. And this image is of a generator that the Idaho National Lab, so it's a US Energy lab, and they're very good with cybersecurity. And they wanted to advertise the fact that somebody can do damage remotely. And so they had a demonstration of, and you could see this video, you know, from a CNN clip of this generator getting ruined by, they sent one command 3 times, and the command was essentially force the generator to go onto the grid out of phase. And apparently that creates an enormous torque. And so after they did it, you know, the first time you could see the thing shudder, and the second time it starts to smoke, and the third time it starts throwing off, you know, pieces, and it's dead. And that all happened in 14 seconds. And these are some other examples of where physical damage was achieved from remote access. So a cyber attack causing physical damage. And in the water sector, unfortunately, we haven't seen that, but you can imagine how it's possible. You know, just when you think about the things that can go wrong in your system, and you've heard about go wrong in other people's systems. And, you know, for us, a lot of it is pressure related. So if you close a valve too quickly, you can create a water hammer and potentially damage pipes. And if you have some weak pipes in the system, it's a risk. You can have multiple pumps come on, more pumps come on than you intend, and over pressurize the system. Just last month, Bloomington, Indiana. So this was not a cyber attack, but this was an example of things that can go wrong in normal circumstances can be created through a cyber attack. And so in Bloomington, they had a large number of breaks, system breaks, pipe breaks, excuse me, and 5 of those they attributed to a SCADA problem. So apparently there was an operator in the treatment plant who was, the SCADA system was not updating that pumps were on, that the water pumps were on. And so he turned on more pumps, and maybe more pumps. I don't know if it was just 2 or multiple pumps, but anyway, an operator, you know, made a choice based on what he was seeing on the SCADA screen, and that caused 5 breaks in their distribution system. So you can imagine how physical damage is possible from a cyber attack. It's really important to stay up to date on what's going on. So in order to do a good job of cybersecurity, you need to understand the threats of the bad guys, what they're up to, and the vulnerabilities, the things that need to be patched in your system. And here are 4 really good options, and I would go with all 4, but the first one I have is the Water Isac. It's a nonprofit. Isac stands for Information Sharing and Analysis Center, and they're ISACs for all the different critical infrastructure sectors. So there's an electric ISAC and a gas, downstream natural gas ISAC. Ours is not federally funded, so it's a nonprofit that depends on our, payments. And this is, you can see what it costs depending on your size. And if you're bigger, you pay more, but it's a really great source of information, and it's distinctly geared towards water. A free resources from our Department of Homeland Security and the Center, the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, that's CISA, has this US CERT, I apologize for these acronyms, Computer Emergency Response Team, and the ICS, the Industrial Control System CERT. They send out alerts. You just sign up. You could do a Google search for US CERT alerts or ICS CERT alerts, and then sign up to get emails. That's really excellent. The Water ISAC will bundle those up for you, but it doesn't hurt having a second source. The MS ISAC is the multi-state ISAC. That's free. It's a really, they provide a lot of services at low cost, and you can join if you're a state organization or a local government. If it may be that you're a community water utility, and you're the IT person in the communities already has signed up, and you can just link to that, or you can sign up for yourself if the community hasn't signed up yet. Really, really good, all 3 of those things. And the 4th one is you definitely need to do, I think, is CISA. So that's the Department of Homeland Security, Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency has a cyber hygiene service. So for free, you sign up, you give them the internet protocol, the IP addresses of your externally facing services. So you might have a customer service server, and you give the IP address, and then once a week, they're going to scan and look for vulnerabilities in your system. So it's not probing in a way that's looking at your system the way a bad guy would and can. So it's scanning for vulnerabilities and helps you keep track of, are you keeping patched or not? So definitely great opportunity. So this is a chat question. If you can type in, just to get us thinking, a short response to what are possible vulnerabilities that can allow bad actors into our process control systems, and consider external threat and insider threat, and list things even if you consider it common knowledge. So just type out a few words if you could, that'd be great. And then we'll discuss some of those and cover some other ones as well.
Andrew, just a time check. It's 9:34.
Okay.
And can you remind me which is the most updated agenda? The one that you're ending at 9:35 or 9:40?
Yeah, that's most up to date. I'll be going about 5 minutes over, I think, on that, and
Okay,
it'll be
which
5
one
minutes
is
short.
most
Module 3.
I think I got them mixed up.
No, it's supposed. This should end at 9:35, but it's going to take a
9:35.
little longer.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I thought you had till 9:45. I could have given you a little more.
Yeah, I'll take it. But
Okay.
I think we'll hit our break on schedule.
Okay.
So I'm seeing some password, weak passwords is really important, is really a major vulnerability. Not sure how to expand this. Team viewer, old hardware, SCADA systems linked. Yeah. Doing the the updates, the patching, remote access, disgruntled employee. Yeah. So those are all good things. Thank you. Visiting sketchy websites, and you can be visiting good websites too, right? You can have staff that go to what's called waterhole sites where that have been compromised. So that's yeah, old software. Okay, excellent. Opening unsecurity emails. Excellent. Okay. So just to go through, you guys you hit on most of these, and there's, I didn't get to see everything that you typed in, but the eUSB drive, somebody just typed in thumb drive. So internet connections, we had missing patches, 0 days, maybe one we didn't touch on, but you got it. Nice. Okay, one more chat question. So what are possible consequences of a cyber intrusion? Consider consequences that you may not be able to quantify, this even if you consider it common knowledge. So what are the bad things that can happen to your organization? And so it may be on the enterprise side, or it might be on your operations side. Somebody just put in customer injury. That's like the Oldsmar. That's the scary thing. Physical damage. We were just talking about that, and it's chemical dose change. That physical damage, the system damage, isn't something sort of widely thought about, but super important. Loss of system configuration. So it's basically the system gets blinded if you lose your configurations. The water system gets shut down, overdosing, chlorine changes, not knowing what happened. That's pretty scary. Is like something's going on and trying to figure it out. Still affecting the revenues. So that's that large U.S. water utility that had the egregor. That was one of their big worries, was, are we going to be able to get out payroll? Are we going to be able to get out our billing on time? And they were able to do that, but it was, partly because they're well organized and some good fortune as well. Public safety, expenses, running the treatment plant facility manually. That's really important to have a plan to do that, but that's a definite possibility. Customer injuries, lose faith, right? The customers lose faith in your operation. Nice. Okay, I'm going to switch back to the slides, but thank you. Those are all excellent, and they, basically, I think you covered. I think you covered everything. You guys could be teaching the class, I think. Public safety, customer trust, productivity, cost, bricks. So that we talked. We didn't use that term, but essentially equipment damage, lawsuits. I don't think, maybe somebody touched on that. I didn't see it, but that goes back to cost, loss of data, notices of violation. You got to report to the DEP, false and incorrect data. Okay. This is just saying that what we already talked about, it's expensive if you're breached. Here they're looking at in terms of the personally identifiable information. So the things like credit cards and what that costs per person, but it's essentially, it's expensive. This is a nice report that the AWWA produced through a woman named Judith Germano, and it talks about the liability issue. So, we as a community system might have sovereign immunity. We still, if we don't do sort of the bare, if we don't do what's considered adequate for cybersecurity, we might get sued for negligence. And so that's another reason to focus on this topic and this problem. We had the America's Water Infrastructure Act's another reason, that's calling for cybersecurity. And this is a summary, plus some other things of, business drivers. Most of these we talked about. One is the, so the bottom left, the data security of HIPAA. That's the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, and the PII is the Personally Identifiable Information. So those are the, you have billing information with people's like credit cards, or you maintain health records on employees, and that gets out, you're going to get fined. Those are big deals. There's in the middle, there's the bonding agencies. It was really interesting. So Fitch Rating put out something just earlier this month about, how if you're not going to, if utility's not doing specifically they're talking about water and sewer utilities are not doing adequate cybersecurity, that might affect their credit risk. But in the same document, they're saying, but if you, but if you spend so much money on cybersecurity and you're not doing the other projects that you should for operational regions, that might affect your risk rating. So you have to find the right balance. This is a document that the AWWA put out, and it's kind of the little Bible of how to use their tool. It's their guidance and how to use their tool, and we'll get into more on that. This is the benefits of using their tool. The one thing probably most important is it's sort of a consistent approach and repeatable. So multiple utilities could do it and compare results and talk with each other. It's geared towards the generally the managers and the IT folks. I think it's really great, though, having maintenance operations people, like the core people, understanding this, because they provide, you all provide really valuable input to this process. It was developed by some experts in the water sector and with cyber. Facilitates compliance with OWIA, and it's consistent with the NIST cybersecurity framework. Okay, so this means we're at the end of this module. I have a couple of poll questions. Rebecca's going to pull them up. If you can answer these, just check to see if if I'm getting across the message. And so this one is: choose the true statement below about cyber attacks. Most attacks are perpetrated by utility insiders. Financial loss is the worst part of a cyber attack. Social engineering threats are increasing. Only ransomware attacks cause financial loss. Okay, we'll give about a minute for that. Okay, and so what I'm seeing is that 75% saying social engineering threats are increasing, and about 20% saying financial loss is the worst part. So not that there's really a correct answer, but the social engineering threats are increasing. What is aiming at? The, am I getting an echo? No. But the financial loss depends on your perspective, right? So that if you're, that could be the from your perspective, that could be the worst part of a cyber attack. So there's nothing wrong with that answer. Okay, the next question, I'll check. Which of the following is a business driver for instituting a cybersecurity program? Potential for operational and financial impact, loss of public confidence, HIPAA and PII regulations, insurance underwriters and credit rating agencies, all of the above. Okay, so nearly everyone's chimed in and nearly everybody said all of the above, so that's nice. Okay, thank you. Okay, the summary, the threats of cyber incident are real, the risks and consequences of a cybersecurity incident can be high. Awwa requires a utility to consider cybersecurity risk as part of its risk and resiliency assessment and its emergency response plan. AWWA created the water sector cybersecurity risk management tool to provide a prioritized list of ways to mitigate cybersecurity. And I don't know, whoops, I'm going to back up. If Rebecca, if there are any questions have come in, if you've thought of, if anybody has a question.
Andrew, this is Lily. I have not seen any yet.
Okay, that sounds fine.
It's just been, yeah.
Okay, thanks, Lily. Okay, so on to module 2, the self-assessment questionnaire. So this is the front end of this tool, is answering a bunch of questions. Oh, but since we're at the start of a module, here's a question about, a poll question about your utility. And just to give us a sense of the size distribution, Lily and Rebecca are going to open a poll. And what is the size of the population that your utility services? And it's under 10,000, between 10,000 and 50,000, between 50,000 and 100,000, or greater than 100,000, or not applicable. Okay, so most folks have responded, and it's sort of a third split. So about a third are less than 10,000, about a third are between 10 and 50,000, some between 50 and 100, and then not, and then another third is not applicable. Thank you. Okay, this is the learning objectives for the self-assessment questionnaire. To discuss the development of the tool, locate where to access the tool, and describe how users save their own data. Distinguish between the 14 cybersecurity practice areas. Identify staff with expertise to take the self-assessment questionnaire, and explain the goals of the self-assessment questionnaire. Tool overview. So it says web-based self-assessment questionnaire. You go into the AWWA website. You can save the data. They don't save the data. Helps facilitate discussion between utility staff about cybersecurity, and that sort of staff within your organization and between organizations. I think that's important, that, you know, we're not in this alone. We can share thoughts and practices. Provide a custom prioritized list of recommended controls, and it does not know which controls you already have in place. So it may recommend a whole bunch of, it's going to recommend a bunch of things, but you may have already done a lot of them. And so you're just going to check them off as done. So accessing the tool, it's, if you go to this web address or do a Google search on AWWA cybersecurity, and you go down the page on the web page, you'll see there's this highlighted line that says access cybersecurity tool. Login is required to access this resource. And so you don't have to be a member of the AWWA to use this, but you do need to create an account, and creating an account is free. There's this guidance document, super valuable. We mentioned that before. And when you're answering those questions, you might wonder, well, what does this mean? And or as you're looking at the output. And this document's going to help you with that. So the process, it's kind of sort of what we've talked about, is it's self-assessment. So you're answering, it turns out there are 22 questions. You're going to run down 22 questions and answer them. It's going to, depending on how you answer, the tool will make a set of recommendations, and they're grouped by sort of common practice areas, and they're prioritized. Okay, so who should fill out this questionnaire? Who should answer the questionnaire? And from my perspective, the more the merrier, and because everybody has a little bit of different perspective and different, additional knowledge. Here it's saying Director of Water Production, SCADA personnel, Chief Information Officer and IT staff, others familiar with the control systems and enterprise system. And I would definitely include the people who have their hands on your system. So it's the maintenance and the operators. If they're going to know things that other people don't know, and or know in a different way, or have a different perspective. So include as many people as you can. Maybe it's just you, it may be just one person, and that's excellent too. The self-assessment questionnaire helps utilities identify controls that support the implementation of cybersecurity practices. So the goal is to identify areas that you can improve your cybersecurity and create a plan to move forward with those improvements. The cybersecurity practices are a set of 14 categories that include recommendations and improvement projects. So these categories, and here they are, in a sense, they're kind of random. It's not like this is like an industry standard list of categories, but it's sort of a practical way of grouping the recommendations, the controls that are recommended, to help you clump them in similar projects. Governance and risk management. So this is one of these categories, and this one is really the most important, and it's kind of the least exciting, but it's vital, and it's important for the long-term success, is to have the management and executive oversight and control of the security system in your organization. So it's defining the policies, procedures, things that people need to do, and moving the whole program forward. So governance and risk management is like the top dog of all these categories.
Andrew, I have a question from Mario that just came in regards to is SCADA inherently a dangerous technology for control in the water treatment? He says he's worked in a 1970s era plant where everything is internally hardwired and not accessible from the outside actors. Is linking everything internally only opening you up to attack? I also write ERPs for my organization, he says.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so absolutely. If you have a relay control system, you're not subject to a cyber attack. But the SCADA systems give you, there are ways to take advantage of both, and we won't have time in this class, but the efficiencies of SCADA, it's really hard to beat sort of the cost savings, and there are things you can do that include incorporating some analog-like safety systems to prevent, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So it's a really good question. I wish we had more time to talk about it. But most of us have a SCADA, some sort of control system that has access for data collection or remote maintenance, and it's hard to avoid that in this world. But yeah, if you are all local and you have certain advantages. Okay, another one of these categories is business continuity and disaster recovery. And this is that running your system manual, right? If your SCADA system dies, can you run your water system manually? Can you keep adequate pressure? Can you keep adequate treatment? And having things like incident response for cybersecurity and backing up your files are all fall in this category. Server and workstation hardening. These are things you can do to make it harder to break into a computer. It might be removing services or unnecessary applications, keeping things patched. Access controls, so passwords and making, using a VPN, which a lot of us have, because of COVID have been doing to the enterprise network using a VPN. And multi-factor authentication, super important. Long passwords that are unique, don't reuse passwords, super important. Application security, this is just making sure a program does what it's supposed to do, and that just the people who are supposed to be using it are using it. Encryption is keeping your data private, only letting it be used by the people or systems you want it to be used by. So it could be encryption in transit. So like as your control system data goes across a radio frequency, it's encrypted, or it could be in storage on a hard drive, it's encrypted, whatever's vital information that you don't want shared. Data security. So this sort of in the AWWA world, this is sort of largely related to the Hipaa and PII. But think of it too in terms of what we're doing now is you're going to create a plan that says, I've got these cybersecurity measures in place and these are the things I plan to do. Well, that's information you don't want to share with the world. And so you want to protect that data. So data security can include information about your IT, details about your IT system or your control system. Telecommunications, network security, and architecture. Important part is the architecture. You can, if you design your network, your enterprise and your SCADA networks well, that can improve the security. And so having segmentation, your routers, firewalls, data diodes. Physical security, really important. If you have physical access to a computer, there's a lot you can do to gain ownership of it. And so locking, particularly important computers, your HMI computers or maybe in a control, your human machine interface computers or maybe in a control room. And so making sure that room is locked or has card access that you keep tabs on, or having the programmable controllers in locked cabinets in your facility so that somebody can't just mess with the PLCs or access the network itself, plug into the network. Service level agreements are important with all the outside vendors and service providers. So it might be that Verizon, we had plenty of problems with Verizon and telecommunications, but if you can spend the money on a service level agreement with them, or with your power sources or system integrators, how quickly they can will respond off hours. Those are the service level agreements. Operation security, generally maintaining keeping security in mind at all times is kind of how I look at this. It also includes things like what your employees post on Facebook or whatever social media they use. We had a young welder, very talented, and he was proud of a hatch, a security hatch that he had welded, which is what you want. And he posted a detailed picture of his security hatch on Facebook, whatever it was, and it was like from the organization's, the utilities perspective, is like, no, we really don't want to share details about how we protect our system. So we, politely asked him to take that off the website and just thanked him for doing a super job. So things like that, operations security, also called OPSEC. So cyber informed engineering. This is sort of going to a cyber attack that can cause physical damage. And that's a whole important topic. And it kind of, ties back to what happened with, so it can be physical damage. It could be, well, we'll stick with the physical damage there's a picture here of a switch, a pressure switch. So this is an analog device that if downstream of a pump, so if too many pumps come on, this pressure switch talks to the pump controller and says, do an orderly shutdown. The pressure is too high. So that was a way of, if somebody broke into the SCADA system, they couldn't turn on too many pumps and break downstream pipes. It's an important topic. Education, really essential as part of what we're doing now. There's the awareness training and the DEP in the material, the handout materials, the DEPs included some awareness training, which is awesome. And also in the handout materials, there's that document called Water Cybersecurity References and Resources. In there are a bunch of references to education training resources and some really good things available for free. And so their classes, their meetings and conferences, take a look at that. Personal security, this is to do with sort of insider threat and, making sure when you hire somebody, there's a background check, and maybe you do background checks subsequently for people that move into more sensitive positions, or maybe you have a reoccurring background check every 10 years. It's not easy, it's a tricky topic, because if you do a background check and somebody has some violation, and what do you do if it's not related? It's not a simple topic. It's important to think about and try to approach it. Certainly when you're hiring people, that should be part of your process. Okay, so we've reached the end of a module, and we've got a couple of knowledge check poll questions, and I'm going to read it off. Who at a drinking water utility should be involved in completing the self-assessment questionnaire? Director of Water Production, SCADA personnel, Chief Information Officer, IT staff, all of the above. Okay, so everybody's saying all of the above, which is great. Thank you. And it's definitely a case of the more the merrier in this. Okay, next question. What is the most important cybersecurity practice category for increasing cybersecurity at your utility over the long term? Personal security, governance and risk management, physical security of SCADA system, SCADA equipment, or service level agreements? Okay. So this is interesting. So a majority, most folks are saying the governance and risk management, and that's definitely the answer for long term. It's like it's creating those policies, enforcing them. It's the hard work of cybersecurity, and for the long term, that's like the most important thing you can do. A bunch of folks put down physical security of the SCADA equipment, and that's so as a person who was involved with SCADA, that's dear to my heart, is keeping everything locked up. So long term, that's maybe not the right answer, but that's super important. Some other folks said the personal security, it's looking at the insider threat, and so that's a scary topic, and so it's important too. And also the service level agreements, you need to have people respond, and maybe you have one of those service level agreements has to do with cybersecurity incident response, so that's important too. But long term, that governance, the policies and procedure piece is the most important. So module 2 summary, the self-assessment questionnaire requires the users to answer a series of questions, provides a set of recommendations customized to your utility based on how you answer the questions, provides actionable recommendations based on practice categories that are designed to produce maximum improvement in the short term and lay the foundation for long-term implementation of complex security programs and controls. Okay, so I think we're doing fairly well with time, but we're going to move on unless there's a question.
No questions, Andrew.
Okay, thank you. So cyber security, so module 3, cybersecurity controls. So we're going to start off with a question about your utility. Has your utility or company had a cybersecurity breach or incident that affected operations? So every organization's had some level of something, but has it affected your operations, either your enterprise operations or your control system? So answer A, yes, impacting the IT enterprise system. Yes, impacting the PCS, ICS, OT, SCADA system. Yes, impacting both IT and PCS systems, or no, or don't know. So, having an impact is pretty unusual. Having an impact on the SCADA system is super unusual. Sort of you look out at the public, what's in the press and all. Okay, most folks have voted, and so this is interesting. So about 10% have had an incident that affected their IT system. So we have about 100 people on this, and so 10 folks have had an IT event that had an impact, and there's one organization that had an impact on the SCADA system, and 3% had both an IT and an OT cyber incident. So that's significant in my mind. And then 70% said no, and 16% said I don't know. Thank you. So we're on cybersecurity controls. So these are the things that you can do to improve your security. And in this module, we'll discuss the concept of the cybersecurity control, identify standards that the controls are based on, describe how answers to the self-assessment questionnaire will result in control recommendations, and explain the rationale behind prioritization of controls by the tool. What are cybersecurity controls? So there are ways to reduce risk, and they can be achieved through organizational changes, procedural changes, technology additions or changes. They come from many different standards. So cybersecurity has been a topic for a long time, and a lot of organizations have looked at ways to improve cybersecurity with controls. And the tool prioritizes the recommended controls, so it helps you sort through, which are the ones I should probably work on first. And it correlates each control to existing standards. Here are some sort of high-profile standards that the controls in this AWWA tool come from. You'll see when we get to the controls, it'll say, here's what we recommend, and here's where it came from. And a lot of this, you'll see the Department of Homeland Security, and NIST is a really super important source of control information. ISA, ISO, big standards. It's also worth thinking about how standards are slow to evolve, and that's a good thing. But in cybersecurity, you might want something that's moving a little quicker, because the adversaries are adapting as they're trying to outpace whatever you're doing. And so if you have a control that's based on a standard that's a few years old, well, it may still be, a good control should still be effective, but it's kind of nice thinking, well, maybe this is more up to date. So these big standards are updated every few years, and that's appropriate for a standard. But then there are other kinds of guides that are more, fresh. They get changed more regularly. One of those is the Center for Internet Security, CIS, used to be called the Top 20 Controls. So what a group of people thought were the most important 20 things to have in place. And then there's another one called the Australian 8. So it's the Australian government says, like, you do these 8 things, you're going to help prevent 70% of problems, or whatever. I don't know the numbers, but the idea is to identify a small subset. With this AWWA tool, it's drawing from 99 controls, so it's going to have maybe that many recommendations, and maybe you've done a big chunk of those. But and that thoroughness is a good thing. But another way of looking at controls is these shorter versions, and in fact, the AWWA is working on a similar class as this, but designed for smaller utilities with a shorter list of controls. So things to keep in mind. And we've seen this before. This is you answer the questions, it goes into the tool, and it spits out some control recommendations grouped by category, but also grouped by priority. And so control prioritization, they've identified priorities 1 through 4. And each control recommendation is accompanied by at least one reference to the applicable standard. So that's those big standards that we were looking at. Priority 1 control is it's the one that here they're saying implement immediately. And there may be 20 or 40 priority 1 recommendations that come out of the tool. So you can't implement them all immediately, but those are the ones to take as priority 1, top priority, and are considered a minimal level of acceptable security for process control system and enterprise systems by the AWWA. And examples include having unique usernames and passwords. And after that, there's the control ID in this tool, and using multi-factor authentication for critical areas. So those are things you should do as quick as you can, because that's really important both those things. And then there are a whole bunch more. Here's the priority 2 controls. It's considered things that are significant, an immediate increase in the security of the organization. So things that are going to make a difference, but you know, it's the next level down. And examples of that include awareness training and incident response training, network monitoring and management. Priority 3, additional security against cybersecurity attack of process control systems, provides a foundation for managed security systems. So it's a little, in the AWA terminology, sort of a more mature set of things you can do. An example is a disciplinary process for security violations. So that you may not want to spend your time doing that up front, but eventually you're going to need to do that. There'll also be, I have one here in parentheses, there'll also be control recommendations, prioritized, and you might decide, well, geez, that prioritization, you know, for my system, I may want to raise or lower it. And, you know, this is not set in stone. So if you see, in this case, we're going to go through an example a little later in the class of an imaginary water utility and use their information to use the tool. And one of the recommendations comes back under priority 3 is to review backup policy and test recovery procedures. So to me, that really should be, you know, in the world of phishing and ransomware, you know, that should be at priority 1. So you want to make sure you're doing your backups the way you think you are and testing recovery procedures. So, you know, I generally like how the priorities are sorted, but look at it, you know, critically and decide, does this, you know, recommendation priority match what you think is appropriate in the current threat world? So priority 4, protection for more sophisticated but less common attacks. And they're saying policies, procedures, state-of-the-art protection mechanisms. And so a good example is the data classification policies. You know, what's secret, you know, depends on your term, but, you know, secret, unclassified, you know, security sensitive, depends on how you phrase it. But that's really valuable because you, as an organization, will put the sensitive documents and treat them differently. And so that's important, but it's not, you know, it's something you're going to evolve into. In parentheses, I have another control recommendation that came out as a priority 4 in this test example, and it was account auditing and employee termination. So this is shorthand, but it's basically you know, when you're looking to see if there are any accounts on a system that all the accounts represent people that are still there and are appropriate for those people. And when you terminate an employee, and this is something you should be, you know, on top of, that when that employee retires or is terminated, you should close down their accounts. So to me, this is something that you wouldn't put in a priority 4. This is probably a priority 1. And you think back to that incident that the Ellsworth County Rural Water District 1 incident that we talked about early on. And that was a prior employee who about a year later, I think, just logged in and turned off the treatment system. So that's an example of, it's a sort of an easy, you know, I'd call it a quick win if you have a program in place to make sure when people retire or are fired, that information gets to the IT person or whoever is that manages accounts, and if the account is terminated too. This is a way of just saying that, you know, the priority 1s through 4. So 1 is the sort of just down on the left, and priority 4s are 1 on the upper right, and your whole system builds as you work your way through those different controls. And the AWWA looks at it as a maturity of your system. there's something the NIST, one of those standards organizations, has the cybersecurity framework, and that's a really important standard. It's a voluntary standard for, most organizations. Some of the government agencies have to follow it. It's very good. They have what they call 4 tiers, and they look at it slightly differently, that it's not sort of a maturity level, but that it's a distinct organizational decision at what tier to be on at. So I may not be able to afford the things that are included in that top tier, that or in the case of the AWA, priority 4. It may be just an expensive process to implement. And so from a NIST perspective, they look at it as a decision. We as an organization, we want to be at the tier 4 or tier 3, and so they can be very mature at that tier. So it's just a different perspective, and that's kind of one interesting thing about cybersecurity. So there are lots of ways of looking at it. So this means we're at near the end of module 3, and we have a knowledge check question. You're going to get a poll coming up. Is what does the user receive by answering the questions as part of the self-assessment questionnaire? The Awwa compliance attestation, certificate of completion, prioritized list of controls, or an encryption key. Okay, so most folks answered prioritized list of controls, which is correct. So the first, the Awwa compliance. So the nice thing about this tool is that it assists you in the 2 main components of Awwa. So the risk and resiliency assessment and the emergency response planning. So it helps support that process, but it doesn't complete the process for you. So that's good. We have the next one, which is which statements describe the priority control recommendations included in the cybersecurity tool output. Offers protection for more sophisticated attacks, needs to be implemented immediately, expected to significantly increase security, or additional protection for an attack on the PCS system. Okay, just a little bit longer.
Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. So we'll stop there. No worries. Most folks said needs to be implemented immediately. And that's, top priority, priority 1. You want to do it as quick as you can. So implement immediately is a bit of an exaggeration, but that's the intent, is those are the things that are top of the list. Okay. So in summary, module 3, cybersecurity controls can reduce risk through organization, procedural, or technology changes. And note it's reduce, because you're not going to eliminate risk. We're trying to reduce it. The controls provided by the tool are simplified restatements of existing standards, so those big standards. The tool draws from standards produced by the National Institute of Standards and Technology, that's NIST. That's a really great source for information. It's free. The International Society of Automation, they have really good standards too, but you have to pay for them. American Waterworks Association, has some material on security, not so much on cybersecurity, but they have other standards and documents. The tool presents recommended controls based on self-assessment questionnaire answers. The tool presents controls in order of priority. The highest priority provides minimum level of acceptable security, and the lowest priority provides complex protection for more sophisticated attacks. And Lily, do you have any questions?
Nope. I do not.
Okay. Well, that means it's break time, and we've got a 10-minute break. Come back in a bit, and we'll keep going. Thank you. Okay, we're back. Oh, that didn't work so well. Hang on. Okay. So we're going to move on to Module 4 and using the tool. So this is a tough part of this class, in the sense that the course was designed to be smaller, in person, and everybody would be reading this example and answering and interacting. So I apologize, this is going to be kind of one-sided. Before we get into this, we at the start of a module, so we have a question about you or your utility, and this question is going to show up as a poll. Does your utility or community government carry cybersecurity insurance? Okay, we'll stop there. And so 4% said yes, so that's kind of cool. Insurance is a tricky thing. 18% no, 65% don't know, 4% not applicable. So if you have insurance, you're going to want to make sure that you and the insurance company are in sync. Just since, like, if I mean, I don't know too much about cyber insurance, but I do know that if they consider the breach an act of war, so if pretend it was the Russia had done something to a bunch of water utilities or critical infrastructure, that might be considered an act of war and you wouldn't be covered. So think something like that you'd want to check into. Learning objectives for Module 4 is to use the tool through completing self-assessment questionnaire, employ the guidance document to help with the tool, generate and save the tool output file, and interpret the tool output file. So here's this same document that you have as in your handout materials that we talked about before. Really good reference. When you go to use the tool, you're going to, if you don't have a WWA account, you're going to create one. It doesn't cost anything. You don't have to be a member. We're going to go through an example now of an imaginary water utility called Acme Water Utility. In the handout materials, you also have it says Module 4 on it, and there's a diagram of their system. There's also Module 4 activity, and that's a description of their utility, and then a Module 4 output file that shows what part of what comes out of the tool. Okay, so let's get started with this example. We have, here's the layout of the utilities network. So this is their enterprise network and their control system network. And I'm just going to walk through it and just point out things that I see. So, here's the internet, and a remote user coming through the internet gets into the administration facility. So there are 4 physical buildings on this diagram. There's the admin building, there's the plant A right here, control network plant A, and then there's plant B. And coming from the internet, the traffic goes through a firewall. So appropriate to expect that. And then once it's in the business network, the enterprise network. It's going over a private network. So that's saying it's their infrastructure. It's not going out, on Verizon or some other carrier. And it's coming into a router. And here's the business system. So it's going from business system to business system. If you want to get to plant A, the traffic is passing through a firewall. So that's the segmentation between the enterprise system and the control system. And in the DMZ, the demilitarized zone, there's the historian where the data from the SCADA system is being collected. And this is the server that also provides remote access. So if I'm that remote user and I'm looking at the SCADA system, I'm going through the internet, through the business enterprise, through the firewall, and to this server. And then this server, there's a connection to the remote user, and then goes back through the firewall into the control network down here. And we see it says the control room with an HMI and a control server and a PLC, another HMI. There's a wireless access point here. So they've got Wi-Fi set up on their control system, something you might have to do for some reason, not something you necessarily want to see, but there may be a really good reason to have that. And then here's just a cell phone hanging in the air. So this is implying that there's remote access to the control system through a cell phone. And so the cell phone is going to be basically doing that traffic's going to be like that remote user. It's like the cell phone is going to an application that's maybe a virtual private network connection. And then also from plant A, you see they have a radio network to remote facilities. So they're using their own hardware, but it's radio frequency traffic going to a booster, going to some pump stations and a storage tank. And here's plant B. So if I'm the remote user going to plant B, I go through the internet to the firewall, through the private network, the private infrastructure. And to go to plant B, I don't go through a firewall. I have a direct connection from the enterprise network to the control system at plant B. So plant B is much more exposed to the world. It also has another exposure. So the HMI control server, the PLCs, it has the camera. So it has a security camera, an IP, so internet protocol. It's on the network. And that's just to point out, that can be a security risk of its own, because often the security camera's outside. If say it's outside and it's near the fence line, somebody with bad intentions could open up that, if it's accessible in a way, they might be able to get access to the cabling and to the internet. And excuse me, not the internet, but the network for the control system, because that camera's on the control system network. So that's an exposure that you'd want to keep an eye on. So you have that document and can look at that. So here, I apologize. I'm gonna read through this. Because this is the information that we need to answer the questions. So so just some summary points. Acme Water Utility Overview. There are 2 SCADA technicians must be in front of a PLC to make program changes. Operators have read-only access from mobile phones and can make changes with credentials. Radio communications to remote stations, no SCADA non-production environment. So that's another way of saying they do not have a test bench, a test system to try out their, say, new SCADA software before they put it in production. Then manages customer service. They manage customer service payments. Okay, here goes. I'm reading these detail. Hang in there. It says the following details provide background information about the cybersecurity environment at Acme Water Utility. Acme Water Utility, AWU, employs 2 SCADA technicians for normal SCADA system maintenance, including PLC programming and limited network troubleshooting. So as I'm reading this, you might want to be thinking about how your utility compares to this utility and sort of mentally work your way through the questions as I do. But so think in terms of comparing yourself to this utility. The SCADA technicians can go online with PLCs from plant A to plant B and vice versa. However, AWU policy is that they must be in front of a PLC to make program changes. So that's a good policy. AWU has 2 preferred system integrators that provide SCADA and PLC programming services. AWU has a remote access connection for the system integrators that must be manually connected to the network for system integrators to have access. So that's saying like somebody in the control room needs to plug in something or turn a switch to provide access. They can't just make access anytime. Once the system integrators have access, they can program PLCs, but AWU policy requires that a SCADA technician be present if any SCADA program changes are to be made. AWU policy requires that backup copies of code be made and copied to a server in the administration facilities, so there is an off-site backup. That's a good process. But think of that also in terms of you're moving data between the enterprise network and the control system network. All routers are configured and managed, full-time monitoring by the City of Acme IT department. We're going to call it IT. Remotely and locally if needed, IT is also responsible for all business system workstations and servers, which are patched automatically. SCADA servers can also be updated by IT, but only upon request by the SCADA technicians through a manual process. The manual update process involves IT downloading the patch from the internet and installing manually. The SCADA technicians are responsible for all SCADA switches and SCADA servers. All managed switches are configured using a graphical user interface built into the switch. All SCADA equipment use the 192.168.1.x network address space, since there is less than 256 devices total. The AWU operators have local operator interface terminals, OITs, throughout the plants that control local processes only. The OITs are installed within the perimeter of the plant, which is fenced. There's a central SCADA HMI in a secure control room in Plant A that can control and monitor both Plant A and Plant B, which is unmanned. Operators also have read-only access to the SCADA system from 2 mobile phones that are shared by the on-call operators. However, SCADA technicians can use their mobile phones to make system changes if they use their login credentials. All mobile phones have 4G connections and can be used from anywhere that has a 4G connection. The AWU SCADA system features a control server at Plant A that hosts dual virtual control servers for redundancy. So that's a nice feature. These servers are dedicated to the SCADA system. There's no SCADA non-production environment for use by SCADA staff or integrators. Updates to SCADA system software are applied to the system by vendors and utility staff via a temporary network connection. Historical data is automatically sent from the control servers to the historian located in a DMZ. The SCADA system includes an alarming package that can call out for alarms and send text messages or emails. 900 megahertz unlicensed spread spectrum radio is used for communications to the booster pump station, lift station, and storage tank. Communication between the administration facility, Plant A, and Plant B is by way of a private fiber optic network owned by AWU. So there's just a little more, it's not on that slide, but 2 short paragraphs of additional information about their system that we need for answering questions in the tool. AWU uses chain, and this is in your handout material, uses chain of custody documents and only purchases NSF certified chemicals. Procurement of hardware and software is done by AWU on a low bid basis. Other bid evaluation criteria are not considered due to municipal procurement laws. AWU is part of the Acme City Public Works Department. The Public Works Department billing division handles all service payments. AWU's GIS division integrates Acme billing division's database to provide customer names, addresses, and other contact information, such as phone numbers, to utility staff to be able to service connections. The Acme Public Works Department stores employee health and safety information, including past incident reports. These past incident reports include occupational health reports with employee information, such as names, addresses, and birthdays. So that's the full description. We took and we're going to use that to work the tool. So this will just take me a little bit. I'm going to do, what do I want, not that. We're going to go to I'm just doing, I did a Google search on AWA cybersecurity tool. And there it is. Clicking on that first item and scrolling down to where there's that list of choices. And here's what we're after: access cybersecurity tool. And it says login is required. So it's going to take me to the login screen. I log in. And so it's welcoming me to the AWA Water Sector Cybersecurity Risk Management Tool. And it's giving me a lot of the background that we just went through. And it's recommending that you use that the cybersecurity risk management guidance document that we referenced a couple times. They've got a few term definitions just to help out. So when you're going through this the first time, there are enough terms that are unfamiliar that it's kind of a pain. And so again, the more people you have with you, the more likely you can move through it quickly. So I just clicked next. I'm going to start answering these questions based on what we read and what we looked at in the diagram. And so knowing your own system and sort of the way data information flows through it and what kind of OT and IT processes your utility has is going to influence the output of this tool, the recommendations and the priorities. So I'm going to go through, there are 22 questions. I apologize. I'm just going to run through these fairly quickly. Are any data transferred to or from your PCS network by any electronic means? And so, and they give examples, and all the questions have examples and details. The Acme water utility, one thing they had was they had the historian data was moving between the enterprise system and the PCS system. So I'm going to say yes and hit next. And then And it's showing that this is a category of process control system questions. And there are more process control system questions than enterprise questions, but those will show up later. Do users manually transfer any electronic data to or from your PCS environment? So manually, and they give examples. There was, in this case, they do some manual transfer of backups. I think they do the patching, and one specific example that's given on this page is temporary network connections. And that's something that the integrators, when they're doing a remote connection, they're getting a temporary network connection. So we're saying yes to this question. Question 3, are any electronic data transferred to or from your PCS environment using an automated process without user interaction? So this feels kind of repetitive because we're saying yes again, if because of the historian data transfer. If the very first question you had said no, it would have skipped these next two. But since we said yes, it's asking the following 2 questions. Are any users allowed to access your PCS environment remotely? So yes, the operators, remember, can access it remotely, as well as the SCADA technicians. Say yes to that. Is remote access to your PCS network allowed via mobile devices? Yes, so they can use the cell phones, both the operators and the SCADA technicians. So another yes. Is remote access to your PCS allowed at physically secured fixed locations? So this goes to, the answer is yes, and the reason is they have in plant A, which is a fixed location, they have their control room, which is secure, and that location can access the remote plant B. So yes to that.
Andrew, we do have a question.
Okay, sure.
What are the requirements to get cybersecurity rich risk management tool login account?
So no, the only requirement is to just agree to, there's a statement. You do not have to be an AWWA member. Anybody can get an account. And there's some agreement you say, on the right-hand side, I don't remember what it was, but it's sort of a typical, site usage kind of agreement. So anybody can do it, no cost. And by the way, we'll talk about it later, but you're entering information, like right now, I'm entering information that I don't want to necessarily share with the world. If I'm trying to protect my system, I want to keep the way I protect things as private as I can. So, the AWWA does not collect any of this. The way, I don't know all the details on how this works, but it's essentially, so it's loading the data. I'm told that it's done through your browser. And when you, at the end of answering all these questions, we'll get to it, you create the output file, and that output file stores the information and puts it on your computer. So they don't keep that information. They don't have access to that information. Okay, so back to this. Question 7, do you use resources outside your organization to support and or maintain your PCS environment? And so here, so the answer is yes, they use the system integrators. Here's some examples they have, the bulleted examples, just to help you along. Do resources, for example, service providers outside your organization provide PCS support via remote access? So yes, we have those remote access from the integrators. Do internal staff provide support for your PCS via remote access? So the SCADA technicians can as well. Are all changes or updates made to your PCS environment first tested in a development, test bed, non-production, or training environment prior to being deployed and implemented in the field production environment. And so this answer is no. This utility does not have a test bed to try things out and run them for a while to make sure they're working the way they're expected to. So we're answering no to that. Does your PCS include third-party network communication services? So this system has the 4G communication, so that's Verizon or some other utility. So yes, there's a third-party network communications. Does your PCS network use licensed or unlicensed wireless radios between facilities? So yes, they had I think it was an unlicensed 900 megahertz radio system. I have to scroll down a little to get to the yes on that. Does your PCS share a LAN? So LAN is a local area network, or a WAN, a wide area network with non-PCS equipment. So it's saying, is your SCADA system and your enterprise or network, this shares the same equipment? And in this case, yes, because remember, plant B was on the exact same network as the admin building. So we're saying yes to that. Do you use Wi-Fi within the PCS environment to transfer data in support of operations or monitoring? So we don't know how they use that Wi-Fi, but it's connected to the PCS environment, that Wi-Fi access point. So we're going to say yes to that. Presumably it's for support of operations or monitoring. Do you use virtualization technology for your PCS system? And so this utility has virtualized redundant servers for the PCS system. Is the virtualization technology dedicated to PCS only? So from the description and actually where that server is placed, that's dedicated to PCS. So we're going to say yes. Does your organization accept, process, store, or transmit credit card or debit card information, or accept payment with prepaid cards branded? I don't know why they bothered to say who it's branded by, but American Express, Discover, JCB, MasterCard, or Visa International logos. I don't know why they name those, but it's probably a good reason. And so while the water staff isn't doing that billing, another part of the town is, and so that's included in the way this is looked at. It's part of the same system, and so we're saying yes to this. Does your organization own, license, acquire, or maintain any personally identifiable information? So again, it's not the water personnel, but the town, and so presumably a connected system has this personally identifiable information that they had on the health incidents. So that's a yes. 19, is your organization an employer that creates or receives health information that is HIPAA protected? So the answer, same kind of thing. The answer is yes, there is that health information that's HIPAA protected. Is your organization responsible for engineering, design, and implementation of critical infrastructure? And so this is, if you look at the third bullet here, it says, are you part of a stakeholder organization that has internal resources or hires external resources to design and implement critical infrastructure? So the answer's apt to be yes for everybody for this, because either you're doing it in-house or you're hiring somebody outside for engineering design for upgrades, expansions, whatever. So yes. Does your organization have a supply chain risk management program? And so in this case, and they give an example of NSF. Oh, so that's interesting. I didn't know the highlighted acronyms are expanded, but here it's this just like a little a typo, not a typo, but a mistake. So it's not NSF in terms of chemicals. It's it was something. It's something closer to national sanitary something. Anyway, doesn't matter. And the answer was yes, they do. They track their chemicals. They make sure they're getting what they are intending to get. And there's a chain of custody. So yes to that. Does your organization have a supply chain risk management program that specifically addresses cybersecurity? And the answer to this one is no. In the description, they talked about they go with the low bid. And that was just, they're a municipality, they're required to go low bid. And so that's what they're doing. And this is a hot topic, right? With solar winds. We don't have time to talk about it, but solar winds was a supply chain attack, that the Russians did against a lot of folks. Okay, so that's the 20. We hit question 22. We go to next. It's giving you a little bit saying thank you. It's giving some more information about priorities. What are priority 1, 2, 3, and 4? It's a reminder that it's not trying to assess what you do already, and there's can use the output file to help out. Generate the Excel. Okay, and so here we can exit, and all the data that we entered will get lost, which is, if that's what you want to do, that's good. Or we generate the Excel report. So I clicked on that in the corner, and okay, so that's created. I'm going to okay, so I opened it and it's on a different screen. So hang on, I'm just going to pull that up.
Yep, or you can switch screens.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm going to go with the switch the screen.
Yep.
Okay, so it's kind of tiny. Look, I think. So let me.
The quick way to zoom, Andrew, if you have a mouse, is to hold the control button and spin the wheel away from you.
Thank you.
A couple of clicks. You're welcome.
Oh, very good, Rebecca. Okay, after some. I have an annoying bar that's blocking part of my view.
Is it the go-to training control panel? Or?
Rebecca, there was an option for hiding your taskbar. Where was that?
Yeah, so in the control panel, go to screen sharing. In the drop-down menu under show my screen, you can click, screen 1, 2, clean.
Oh, okay.
1 or 2,
very
I think
good.
it's the clean version. Yep. Or you can also just choose Excel itself, whichever you would like.
Let me try the Excel version.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm going to do the mousiness. Okay, so here's
better.
what's created. You get a spreadsheet, and if you along the bottom are 7 tabs, and right now we're in tab number 7. It says user answer summary. Now, in the bright red message, it says if data not visible below, press Control Alt Function 9 keys. The data is visible, but if you look at that data, it's not the data we want. So always, whether or not you see data or not, press the Control Alt Function 9 keys, and it'll load your data. It'll show your data. And the I pointed this out to the AWWA, and they're going to be updating this, so that's not an issue. So I just pressed Control Alt and the Function 9 key, and it pulled up our data, our answers to the questions. And there they are. They're the 22 questions. I'm going to jump to the far left, and we have the first tab says Start Here. And it's basically going through the things that we've talked about. And so, you know, if you decide like a week from now or a month or some time or tomorrow, and, you know, some things are fuzzy, this is going to talk you through a lot of what we're going to be discussing today. The next tab over says Troubleshooting. And I think because of different versions of Excel, they had to have their like slightly different responses. And so things like the Control Alt Function 9 key, and it gives you descriptions of, you know, if your computer can't use that key combination, there's an alternate method. And so that, hopefully you won't need that, but if something doesn't work the way you expect, then maybe you go to there. Now I'm on this tab labeled number 2, which is the third one over from the left. And this is what we've been waiting for. So this is a list of controls. Each line, by the way, when you see something in the blue, any of the cells in blue are cells that you can enter information in. So each line is a control, a recommended control, and based on your answers to the question. So it's not like radically different. Like if I'm utility A and utility B and we have different answers, there's going to be overlap in our answers, and there's going to be overlap in the control recommendations, but maybe the prioritization may be different. Some controls may not be recommended, but there's a total of 99 that are drawn from. And so there are 90, you know, depending on how you answer, there may be 99 recommendations, and hopefully some of these are already in place. And you can, on the left-hand column is their reference name for the control. Let me expand this. Just so we can see the description. Yep, I do. Try one more time. App text. Okay. So for some reason, just the top few were compressed and the rest were expanded. So I expanded those top ones. And these are the description. The next column over are some additional ways of looking at it, the description, or thinking about it with potentially examples. And then the priority, so this is the priority 1 through 4, 1 being the highest to do sooner. We're going to get to control status in a second, but basically this column is for you to enter the status of that control. Is it something that you already have in place, or you're thinking about, or you've decided not to do, or it's partly installed? The next column is if you want to group these control recommendations by category. Remember, we had those 14 categories. That may be one way you want to think about it, or think in terms of, how you might either budget or contract out projects. So it's just there if it's useful for you to think about it and sort it by different categories, similar categories. The next column over says control references. And so I've got this, I'll just read this one off. This first control recommendation is a forensic program established to ensure that evidence is collected, handled in accordance with pertinent laws in case of an incident requiring civil or criminal action. And so if you look at this right-hand column that says control references, you can find out more information on that. And if you look in one of the guidance document that's in your material handouts, there's a page there that says which standard this DHS CAT, it's a Department of Homeland Security catalog, and it's their standard. It's their control number 2.7.7. And so you can go to these control references and get more details about what's intended. This control descriptions here, are often shortened versions, and it may be a big help to read the full version. So the references are there. This is the part where, so you, along with hopefully some other folks, answered questions, those 22 questions, and now you need to answer 99 more questions. But so the control status, there's this little drop down kind of tab, and it gives you a choice. So you're not typing, you're looking at this control recommendation, in this case, forensic program established. Like, no, I don't have one. And, even though this is a priority one, I may not get to this one for a long time. I know I'm gonna go through them all, and maybe I'm gonna resort and reorder and decide. But right now, I'm going to just say planned and not implemented, and then I'm going to work my way down. An audit program established to ensure information systems are compliant with policies and standards. So this is another one I may not get to. I want to do it, but I'm going to just say, I plan to do it, but I haven't implemented it. Framework of information security policy. I'm not going through all 99. I just want to do a few of these so we can see some subsequent screens and displays. Framework. So I'm going to say I've done my security policies and procedures. So I'm going to say fully implemented. The next is governance framework to disseminate decision making. So this is pretty similar, but it's making sure that it's getting reviewed regularly, and disseminated decision, executive authority. So I'm going to say that one's also fully implemented. And next is information security responsibilities defined. So and assigned. Have you assigned a person to be responsible? And I'm going to say yes. And then the next two, I'll do a program established to ensure compliance with the minimum PCI. So just for variety's sake, I'm going to say partially implemented. And so just one more, privacy policy, as well as a cybersecurity breach policy. So those here I'm going to look at that additional detail. Operator knows how to identify and respond to a suspected cyber breach based on cybersecurity training. Okay. And this is something I'm going to do, but for the purposes of this demonstration, I'm going to say, I'm going to pick the not planned and not implemented. I'm going to accept this risk. This is, you know, so you have a lot of control recommendations, and you're not going to be able to do all of them. And you're going to go through, work your way through the priority ones, go through this process of like, yeah, we've done it, or we've partially done it, or we want to do it, we just haven't started yet, or no, we're not, this one we decided can't see where we're going to get to. But maybe in 2 years you're going to, you know, this is something that you need to keep looking back at, because threats and vulnerabilities change over time. And so you're going to be reviewing this, and it may be that 2 years from now you say, yeah, we're ready to do this. So you go through, work your way through, and again, you're going to need folks to help you. You know, not one person knows all the answers probably. And whoopsie, excuse me. And you can see in the, hopefully you can see the priority numbers are changing. So I get down to here's my last priority one, and then priority twos are starting, and not so many of those. Priority threes list starts, and then much shorter priority four. So, you know, it's heavily weighted to do these things as soon as you can. So that's what we're going to, let's see how we're doing for time. 35, 10 minutes. So we'll take a look at, why don't we'll, so at this point, we're going to jump back to the slides. That's the process of answering the question, you know, going to the website, answering the 22 questions, generating the output report with the control recommendations, and then working your way down through your status of those, because the tool doesn't know what you have in place. So we're going to go back to the oh, not quite that.
Yep, other screen, or you can switch in that.
Yeah, let me, thank you.
There you go.
Okay, so that's the tool demonstration. And so we're coming to the end of this module 4, which means a couple of knowledge check questions. And the first one is choose the correct statement about the AWWA cybersecurity assessment tool. It scans the security system the tool is installed on, provides one-size-fits-all recommendation. It uses your answers to recommend controls. AWWA saves all data entered into the tool. Okay, that's good. So most folks answered uses your answers to recommend control. So that's the goal, is that it tries to help speed your process. It tries to identify, based on what your system has, It tries to recommend controls more specific to you and prioritize them in a way that makes sense. The last answer, so that's as important to remember, that the AWWA does not save the data you entered. So that's, a concern. Is like what, exposing your security information, and they do not save that information. So the next control, knowledge check is, does the whoops. Oh well, does the AWA keep any of your utilities answers to the 22 questions in the cybersecurity assessment tool? Yes or no? So we kind of touched on that, and folks are voting no. So correct. They do not keep your answers or the results. So okay. We'll call that there. And so that no, they do not, which is a good thing. Now, just this quick summary on Module 4. AWWA's website provides access to the cybersecurity tool. When using the tool, you answer the self-assessment questionnaire questions as they apply to your system. An Excel output file is first generated online. It can be downloaded. So that's not quite right. I mean, I guess it could be, but it's not saved online. It gets downloaded to your computer. So I guess that's correct, excuse me. The tool does not assess current cybersecurity controls already in place at the utility. That's where we were entering in the status. The user can select the control status that best applies to each recommended control in the output file. Okay, we're doing well with time. Any have you seen any questions, Lily or Rebecca?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
Questions coming in. Just a reminder to folks, write them in the chat if you do have any.
Okay, and so on Module 5, implementing recommendations, which start of a module, we have a question about your utility. Is there an individual who is responsible for cybersecurity at your organization? Not yet. A manager / supervisor with multiple responsibilities, the town's IT person, the utility's IT person, or a contractor or vendor. Okay, well, thank you. So that's really interesting, and it's a good mix. I mean, it's an interesting mix, and so 19% are saying not yet, and that's an easy place to be in, and it's maybe one of the very first steps is saying, hey, you're responsible, because you need that. You need a point person, and that point person, may not know too much about cybersecurity, and that's okay, but they're steering the ship, right? We've got a lot of folks with, or a few, so like almost a quarter where it's the manager or a supervisor who's got all sorts of things on their plate, and cybersecurity is just one more. The town's IT person, and that's important, I think, to think in terms of, so the IT person they will have a technical orientation, and it's important to make sure they also sort of keep a broad perspective. So on the policies and procedures piece, so there's cybersecurity hands-on, and then there's cybersecurity organizationally. So it's good to keep both in mind. The utility what percent? 15% of the utilities has an IT folks that's in charge of cybersecurity, and then some have an external source, a contractor or a vendor, and that works too. But you want to make sure you also have that internal awareness training and policies for staff to know what to do when certain things happen. Okay. So this is the implementing the recommendations. This is learning objectives is utilize the output file towards the preparation of a cybersecurity improvement plan. So that's, for your benefit, figuring out how to approach cybersecurity and keep it going, making progress, because there's so much that can be done, and we're often not where we want to be. And then apply output file to facilitate compliance with Awwa risk and resiliency assessment and the emergency response plan. So the key word there is facilitate, keywords, facilitate compliance. So it's not going to do everything for you, but it gets you, it helps a lot. It does a lot of what is required, and certainly what's required from a cyber security point of view. So this is the next steps in the process. We review the output file generated by the tool. We did that, and use the project implementation form. We're gonna go back online and take a look at that spreadsheet, and we'll look at the project implementation form, which is designed for cybersecurity projects. It's optional. It might be useful or not. Develop a cybersecurity improvement plan. So that's not within the tool, but you're using the data from the tool. And then complete a declaration of due diligence with for communication with utility leadership and for documenting compliance. This is another optional piece. It probably made more sense to do this prior to Awwa, but now that Awwa exists, you're essentially doing the same thing in a more formal way. But we'll take a look at that as well. And then print results for inclusion with compliance documentation, communication with stakeholders, and improve project risk and resilience management strategy development. Design improvement. So we're going to, when we go back looking at that spreadsheet, we'll review the suggested and user-defined improvement projects tab, use the project implementation plan tab to help design projects. So developing, so if you use this tool, don't stop with just the output of the Excel spreadsheet. And don't stop with just using it for the Awwa compliance. If you can, use it to develop a cybersecurity improvement plan. So if you want to map out your future and make it formal. So develop a formal plan for recommended controls that are not currently in place. Assign roles and responsibilities for the implementation of the projects. Establish a budget and implementation schedule for projects, and prioritize projects based on available time, budget, and utility planning objectives. More on this, cybersecurity plan considerations to achieve the required improvements. An effective blend of technology and procedures should be implemented. Yeah, so it's easy to think cybersecurity, I'll buy a product and put it in place. And that's just part of it, right? So the policies and procedures, what you and your staff do are super important, and what your vendors and integrators do. An improvement plan is a highly sensitive document. Please check with your legal counsel to confirm coverage by applicable Freedom of Information Act exemption laws. So in theory, somebody could send a request and say, hey, utility, I would like a copy of your cybersecurity improvement plan. But you don't want to share it. And the AWWA produced this document called Protecting the Water Sector's Critical Infrastructure Information, and it looks state by state at what protections are in place at a state level. And Massachusetts is an example of one that has good protection. So if somebody asks for this document, you can just say, I'm sorry, this is a protected document. But the way this, just like this bullet says, refer to your legal counsel for the real answer. The utility cybersecurity program must continually evolve to address new technologies, utilities' use of those technologies, and changing threats. So that's like a cybersecurity overarching theme, is the threats are changing, the new vulnerabilities come up. It's a constant process. We can use what we did with this tool to help with compliance with WIA. So there's the WIA requirement for the risk and resiliency assessment. The Excel spreadsheet can help with that portion of the requirement. Same on the emergency response plan, can help you, list out your plan. So remember, in a WIA, emergency response plan means you're planning for doing things in the future, versus I used to think of emergency response plan as this pipe breaks, what are we going to do plan, and this is more of a planning document. Risk and resilience assessment. The risk and resilience, the RRA control output. So it's a tab that we did look at. That's the one that has the controls listed, and the RRA control status summary. That's one we haven't looked at yet, but we will shortly. Facilitate compliance with the risk and resiliency assessment, which required, taking a look at electronic, computer, or other automated systems, including security of such systems, monitoring practice of the system, including network monitoring. That's also includes security monitoring, as in physical, but it can be cyber security monitoring. And then the financial infrastructure, and that relates to the IT and enterprise systems. The second half of WIA is the emergency response plan, and tab 4 in the Excel spreadsheet we'll be taking a look at helps with that. And the WIA ERP requirements, I'm going to do I'll just read through strategies and resources to improve the resilience of the system, including the physical security and cybersecurity system. So I listened to EPA presentation, and the EPA person summarized it as resilience strategies for that number 1. And the next is plans and procedures that can be implemented, and identification of equipment that can be utilized in the event of a malevolent act or natural hazard that threatens the ability of the community water system to deliver safe drinking water. And the EPA person said that that's the emergency plans and procedures. Next is actions, procedures, and equipment that can mitigate. I'll just go to the EPA short version. This is the mitigation section. And then the last is the detection strategies. Okay, so now we're going to go back to the spreadsheet, and I'm going to do the screen switch. Let's see if that works. Okay, so we're back, and we had looked, just as a reminder, we were in this tab number 2 with the risk and resiliency control output. So that's the output. We updated it with in that central blue column with our status, our control status. And now we're going to go to the number 3 tab, which is the risk and resiliency assessment, dash control status summary. So this is a roll up of our responses. and it's sort of a heat map kind of presentation of, we've got a, on the left-hand side is of this small little spreadsheet, it's the priority controls 1, 2, and 3, and then going across, it's the total controls not fully implemented, and then not planned. Oh, okay, sorry. So, and then the blue column is not planned or not implemented. So you decided, I'm not doing this. I'm going to accept that risk. And then next, the controls that are planned and not implemented. So the ones that you want to do, and then the controls that are partially implemented. So you're halfway through, partway through, and then the controls that you fully implemented. So this is just a quick summary. You can see how we have a red text that says controls missing implementation status. So there are 92 of the controls from the prior screen that we haven't given a status to yet. But this will give you the % summary of what you have done. And then down a little bit further down is a summary of ones. These are the ones that you've decided to do improvements. And it's grouped by the categories. So these are the controls that you either are in the middle of implementing, or you haven't started, but you plan to implement. So this is going to be part of your cyber security improvement plan that you extract from the information on the prior page and this kind of summary information. And all this information that we've seen so far is good material for your risk and resiliency assessment. I'm going to shift to the next tab. And this one's the ERP Improvement Projects. It's awfully similar. This first part is real close to what we were just looking at, where it's grouped by category. Those are things that these are projects on your improvement list, the cybersecurity improvement plan by category. And then below are the specifics. And take a note here. So this relates to versions of Excel, I think, but in large red print, it says if data is not visible below. So we're seeing some data, but we're seeing a gap as well. It says click filter tab. So that's, I'm going to click on the filter tab in cell B28 and deselect blanks, then select OK. So I'm going to click on that little arrow and I'm going to deselect the blanks and I'm going to say OK. And so these are the projects that we clicked that I identified as ones that are either in progress or we haven't done, but we want to. And so this can be part of your Awwa emergency response plan. So your cybersecurity improvement plan as well. Then moving over to the next tab it's called Project Implementation Form. This is optional. What this is just their attempt to make life easier for you. So you maybe this is how you might start off a project, but you're apt to have some form or format that you use for creating projects, and you're more likely to use that. But this sort of gets you started with maybe packaging up some of the controls that you want to work on, and maybe you group them by priorities, or maybe you group them by those categories. Okay, we're going to look at the next tab over. This is the Declaration of Due Diligence. This is another optional one that I think became pretty outdated with Awwa. So we won't really go into it, but it's basically, you're saying as the person filling this out, and you're saying it to your top management, here's what we've done, here's what we plan to do, here's what we've decided not to do, as a way of demonstrating due diligence for, say, liability purposes. But I think what we're all doing under Awwa is essentially doing the same thing. So that you can use or not. And then the last tab is back where we started, which is your answers, our answers, my answers to those 22 questions. Okay, I am going to return to where we were before, and we're going to wrap things up. If I can, okay. So we've come to the end of this module, which means a couple of knowledge checks. These are the last two. Which of the following is not true about the output file from AWWA's cybersecurity assessment tool? It can help inform the cybersecurity portion of the RRA. It can help design cybersecurity improvement projects. The Declaration of Due Diligence satisfies the Awwa requirement. It can help with cyber risk reduction strategies in an ERP. So it's picking the one that's not true. So, 3 out of 4 are true and 1 is a dud. Okay. Thank you. So majority had it, yeah. So the Declaration of Due Diligence, it does not satisfy the Awwa requirement, and the others. I always find it a little complicated to have these like not true kind of questions, so I apologize for that. And then the next one is another not kind of question. Which of the following is not a step in developing a cybersecurity improvement plan? Establishing a budget and schedule for projects, develop a formal plan for recommended controls, share details about cybersecurity controls with customers, prioritize projects based on time, budget, and objectives, and assign roles and responsibilities for project implementation. So most of these are actual steps that you want to take in developing a cyber security improvement plan, but one is not. Okay. That's excellent. Just about everybody said the share details about cybersecurity controls with customers. That's the right answer. The Module 5 summary, the tool presents prioritized recommended controls based on your answers to the self-assessment questionnaire. Improvement projects are optional, but if they're done, they should be developed as part as a cyber security improvement plan. So that's, that's a really good thing to do. And even if you're decide not to use, this tool, that you're going to want to have that cybersecurity improvement plan. And if nothing else, it's going to be showing up in your Awwa emergency response plan. Users can define improvement projects based on the recommended controls and gaps found in your current program. The cybersecurity improvement plan should be built to address gaps associated with the recommended controls. A utility's cybersecurity program must continually evolve to address new technologies, and I'd add in threats, the utility's use of those technologies, and the changing threats. Sorry. And if you have any questions, type those in. While you're typing, if you're typing the course summary, During this course, the following information was presented to help attendees prepare to use the tool. The 5 modules included why cybersecurity is important, the self-assessment questionnaire, cybersecurity controls, using the tool, implementing recommendations. So having finished this course, you should be able to recognize the drivers behind cybersecurity and the reasons to implement cybersecurity, explain the priorities of controls generated by the tool, understand the importance of answering the self-assessment questionnaire accurately to generate an Excel output file for your system, take the steps necessary to bring your system into alignment with industrial cybersecurity standards, take the steps necessary to comply with the risk and resiliency assessment and emergency response plan components of Awwa. So we have come to the end. Geez, thank you for your attendance, and thank you, Rebecca and Lily, for doing all the hands-on, behind-the-scenes stuff, and Michael Salona of the DEP for helping to organize this, and Don Bunker of New England Waterworks Association. If you have questions that come up after, like tomorrow or 5 minutes from now, you're like, oh, geez, what I wonder what that means. Feel free to send me an email with a question, and I can respond back. And just remember, cybersecurity is not easy. It's something that's evolving. It's something that we can all work together on, and that's really important. And you can take advantage of a lot of free resources and organizations to learn more, kind of up your game and your staff's game on cybersecurity. Don't forget, there was that CISA cyber hygiene service. If sign up for that, that's really great. The Water Isac, if you can afford joining that. Otherwise, sign up for the US CERT, ICS CERT alerts. There's a lot of opportunities to learn from other people, and it's hard because it takes time, and in some cases it takes money, but there's a real cost both to implement cybersecurity, and there's a real cost if you don't and you're breached. So thank you again, and have a great afternoon, have a great lunch, and hope you keep moving forward in this field. Okay.
I'm just gonna thanks Andrew. I just want to remind people about the evaluation, but Andrew,
yes.
Excellent. You have the best timing. That was a ton of information that you perfectly packed into 3 hours. So thank you. Great job. And I just want to remind everyone that the materials that are in the materials list today that Andrew did mention and go over are also going to be emailed to you tomorrow morning in a follow-up email. That evaluation, just in case you miss doing it or as soon as this shuts down, you can fill out that evaluation tomorrow morning as well. But as soon as you exit, you'll see that evaluation, and you will get your certificates in about 2 weeks. And they'll be emailed to you at the address that you registered for this class. Michael, do you have a word or two?
No, just thanks everyone for attending. Thanks Andrew and Rebecca and our partners for helping us put this on. And yeah, this was really great, very timely and important information.
Okay, thank you everyone.
Okay, take care.